All right, I'm going to call to order a special meeting of the Planning Commission. It is 5:09 p.m. on Tuesday, November 18th. Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner McNally,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Here.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Izant,
Here.
Chair Hirsch.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. This is the time for the Planning Commission to discuss any changes to the order of the agenda items. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, I will see if we have a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we have a vote?
Commissioner McNally,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Izant,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move on to the public comment portion of this hearing. This is the time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on any items listed on the special meeting agenda only. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone in the chambers that wishes to speak during the general public comment? All right. If you can please state your name.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chair, Vice Chair, Community Economic Development Director. Good to see you guys. Eric Horn. I'm really excited that you guys are doing this session. I think that, if we look at just 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, there were 100 people in here that were really, really upset about the prospect of a builder's remedy project. And this is our opportunity to take a look at what's been done well, where we have to make more progress, and hopefully be able to educate the public with transparency on what we need, what you guys need to actually get the job done. When I look at the staff report and I see a couple of different items where we're behind schedule, I get a little nervous. I think that anyone reading the report saying that on housing on city-owned sites and mixed-use expansion being pushed to 2026, some of the programs 10 through 12, such as the local coastal plan being pushed, I think that we're all wondering, does this have the potential to put our housing element certification in jeopardy in the future? I think that getting some clarification on what is grounds for having certification pulled and what is not would be of great help to me and I think the broader community. I was really surprised that 384 housing units were either being developed or in the queue. I was wondering if all of those are individual new doors, added doors in Hermosa Beach, or if any of them are just redevelopments of current lots with the same amount of housing on them. I'd appreciate clarification there. And I guess my question to you, Allison, is do you feel that you have the resources from the City Council, the appropriations, the contracting ability, the staff support to get all of these different items done in the timeline that we need to get them done? I think that I'm sure that this is the first presentation. I'm sure there's going to be a similar presentation to Council, but anything that you guys need, I'm sure would be broadly supported within the community to spend additional resources on. And then finally, I hope that we can have a brief conversation, or at least allude to whether or not there's planning around what we've seen in the news around Redondo, the AES site, the court case that is unfolding, where if we have housing element overlays, zoning overlays on sites that maybe theoretically could be turned into housing or have added housing, but in reality are just not feasible sites. The city doesn't present the true options to do housing on those sites, that could invalidate your housing element. I mean, I saw that article. I look at our housing element and I wonder, are there similar sites in Hermosa Beach that could face those constraints? This would be a question, I think, for our city attorney, but do we have eyes on that court case? Do we have contingency planning in place to be thinking about our legal options in the event that one of our housing element sites is challenged as being essentially infeasible for development? I appreciate it. I know that this is a tough conversation. It's a tough subject, and really appreciate your attention to this matter and all the work that you do.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak during the general public comment portion? Okay, seeing none, I will see if we have anyone online.
There is one online speaker. Tony Higgins, you may speak.
Yeah, hello. To amplify what the last speaker was referring to, a foundational goal, if you'll excuse the term, should be to avoid builder's remedy. It would be a disaster for our community if the housing element lost its certification. And to dovetail with what the previous speaker was talking about, I note that our low income and very low income goals are not being met and are not close to being met. Now, forgive me for saying this, but we dumped 46, I'm just going by memory here, low and very low income RENA allocations into St. Cross. And we knew full well at the time that they were planning to keep a fully functioning church and a school and a rectory. Now, the 46 units at 23, and once again, memory here, but 23 acres or 23 units per acre roughly equates to the entire 2.2 acres of the St. Cross site. So we did get St. Cross to sign a letter that this was okay, to tell HCD that those were valid low income and very low income RENA allocations, but we all know it was a scam. Now, the question is, does that put us at risk now? And given St. Cross is going to at least keep 50% of the site and probably most of it for the existing church, does that put us at risk of decertification? And where exactly are those extra units that we're going to need going to come from? Or are we just going to wait till it becomes a problem and then potentially risk decertification? That's my comment. I hope you can clarify what we're going to do about those RENA allocations at St. Cross and how we're going to replace them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online?
There are no further online speakers.
All right, then I will go ahead and close the public comment portion of this hearing and move on to item number 5, staff items. And as a reminder, public comment will be taken after each item listed below. And they are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So starting with item 5A, the 6th cycle housing element implementation status report, case number 25-CDD-167. Do we have a staff report?
Maybe that'll work better. We'll see. Good afternoon. Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, either in the audience or on Zoom, for the record, my name is Allison Becker. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Hermosa Beach. And today I'm at the podium instead of at the dais to present the assessment report on the implementation of the city's sixth cycle housing element. Next slide, please. So one of the most important powers that municipal government has is its regulatory authority over land use, and that power is implemented through its general plan and zoning regulations. For close to 50 years, cities have been required to develop a housing element as part of the general plan, which specifically focuses on the city's efforts to provide a variety of housing opportunities for its residents. The current cycle, the sixth cycle, establishes programs and activities for the period 2021 through 2029. And like many other cities, Hermosa Beach was challenged to prepare and present a housing element that could be certified by the state because so many of the rules had changed between the fifth and sixth cycles. So while the element itself covers the period of 2021 to 2029, the city's policy documents weren't actually certified until 2024. So this caused some concern, and when I arrived about 7 months ago, there were many questions that were presented as to how we were doing in implementing the housing element. Were we in danger of running afoul of the state? So one of the first things I did upon arrival was to do a thorough review of the city's programs and activities and what it committed to do and where we are today. So that's what we'll be discussing in this presentation. The presentation provides a high-level summary of the activities associated with 5 program areas. And basically, we're looking to answer a couple of questions. How are we conserving existing housing resources? How are we supporting new housing production? Where is the land needed to support a variety of housing types? Are there government constraints which need to be resolved to facilitate housing production? And how are we promoting equal housing opportunities? All of our programs and activities are organized around answering these questions. Next slide, please. So the first policy area is the conservation of existing housing resources. In support of this policy area, the city currently administers 2 programs. One is our code enforcement program. We have 2 full-time officers who ensure that our housing stock meets habitability standards and beyond. On those occasions where, either through proactive investigation or reactive enforcement, we identified properties with habitability concerns, it's the role of a code enforcement officer to ensure compliance. That's one program that we have. The other program focuses on preserving existing affordable housing, which in the city of Hermosa Beach consists of 60 mobile home park spaces. It also includes RV park spaces, and both of those properties are located in the immediate vicinity of the Civic Center in this neighborhood. Together, those form the foundation of the city's affordable housing stock in town. Next slide. One of the key goals of the state of California during this housing cycle, during the 2020s, is the production of affordable housing. So the city actually has 6 programs that are geared in response to that state goal. The first is the city's density bonus program. Density bonus regulations have been in place for quite some time. These are state laws which supersedes local laws and over the years have become embedded in local laws to facilitate affordable housing production, largely by, as the name suggests, providing incentives to increase density in exchange for affordability. So at this point, the city's codes have been largely revised to conform with state law, and we're fully compliant in this program area. The second program area is around supporting affordable housing development through administrative and financial support. There are multiple strategies identified to address this, and they range from being engaged with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, doing outreach and engagement with affordable housing developers through their networks, working with the South Bay Council of Governments, the COG on the development of the region's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, being ready to assist in the marketing of affordable units when they become available, and actually pursuing funding for special needs populations. Next slide. Another area where the city is in conformance is by developing strategies to support the development of multifamily housing by reducing physical and administrative constraints. In Hermosa Beach, that largely takes the form of facilitating lot consolidation. The original pattern of land development for the small coastal town is tiny lots.
Kind of a scam.
The town was developed with this beach cottage pattern. In order to build multifamily housing at a scale that makes financial sense in the present, small lots need to be consolidated into larger assemblies in order to make development feasible. So the city has developed a couple of incentives to support lot consolidation. And in addition to that, we are connecting with developers to let them know about the incentives that we have, and we're also identifying other areas where we may be able to assist in the development of affordable housing. Next slide. There you go. The next program is related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. This is not only a really important source of affordable housing, but it's actually a program that has become popular here in town. The initial reaction to ADUs in many communities was a bit, maybe a little hostile, because this was definitely a change in the strategy when it came to protecting single-family neighborhoods. But as the program has matured, again, over the last 20 years, the push in the recent past has made it easier to build second units, and it's really transformed the city's ability to develop housing. We've done very well in the production of ADUs, and we've also done a number of refinements over the years to our local ordinances to maintain consistency with state law. In fact, we will be bringing a couple of minor adjustments forward in the early next year to revise our ordinance to conform with the most recent changes that were made in the last state legislative cycle. Next slide, please. So one of the most progressive programs that was established in the last housing element was a program of land value recapture. And that is essentially premised on the idea that if you are making changes to zoning which add value to land, the public should be compensated by the provision of a public good. And this is the case with this program. The public good was an assessed fee that was established. The fee itself was established through a number of different studies and enacted in 2024. The program of land value recapture is limited to properties that were identified for the housing element overlay. A number of these properties are small lots, and as I just mentioned earlier, small lots in and of themselves can be very difficult to intensify and often need to be assembled in order to make sense for redevelopment. So the council earlier this year asked staff to bring this topic back to commission to see if there might be a need at this point in time to revisit that policy. We'll be talking about that in just a little further down the road. And the last program in this area is related to housing trust funds. As I mentioned earlier, the city is a member of the South Bay Council of Governments, and we're an active participant in the group, which is forming a trust fund to supply affordable housing, to support affordable housing. Earlier in the housing element cycle, the city contributed funds in support of this effort. Next slide. Providing adequate sites for housing is one area where we're a little bit behind. Now, Program 9 has a number of tasks associated with it, and the text amendments and map amendments that were necessary to create the housing element overlay were completed. So that's a huge accomplishment. In addition, the city committed to initiate a project on city-owned land for affordable housing. And that had a deadline for 2025 to identify a site, issue a request for proposals, and kind of be in the process of creating a project. Given all of the changes that occurred with the department, over the last year or so, this initiative hasn't yet been started. So we are a little bit behind. We can definitely pick that up in the coming year. The other thing that is planned for next year is the expansion of mixed-use areas in commercial zones. Next slide. The next area is focused on removing governmental constraints to housing production. And we're just a little bit behind in this area. On the one hand, the city is completing a number of different zoning text amendments. 2024, this is right as the housing element was adopted, which allowed a variety of different types of housing that are supportive of persons with disabilities and special needs. We are also planning to further strategies for live-work housing next year. Insofar as streamlining is concerned, which is discussed in Program 11, a number of processes and procedures have been reformed to support timely processing of housing developments, including revisions to PDPs, the establishment of objective design standards in the HE zone, and procedures for the implementation of SB 35. However, more can be done. Specifically, the housing element identified eliminating the conditional use permit requirement for condominium development, and this is a zoning text amendment which we will bring forward next year. Another one of those areas that was identified as a constraint was the fact that the city does not have a certified coastal plan. The city did commit to submitting that land use plan and implementation to coastal in 2024. But again, given all of the transition in the department, that did not happen last year, and we're in the process of resuscitating that effort. Next slide. The last major policy area is focused on equal housing opportunity, and we have two program areas here. One is affirmatively furthering fair housing. Here we have multiple strategies which are all intended to advance fair housing, outreach, education on housing discrimination, developing and utilizing informational materials to advance equal housing opportunity, accommodating persons with disabilities through our processes and procedures, collaborating with and promoting housing assistance programs, and holding at least one public meeting a year to talk about housing issues. So meetings like this, except in a variety of formats, we'd like to use a variety of formats to be talking to residents about housing. And then the other is how we invest our CDBG funds from the federal government, making sure that those investments are evenly distributed and support residents across the city. This is a program that the Public Works Department undertakes every year, and we're definitely on track with that. Next slide, please. So that's a very high-level summary of all of the policy areas and all of the programs that the city is undertaking as part of our commitment to implement the housing element. And for the most part, I'm just going to give us, an A minus, a B plus. We're doing great. There are a couple of areas that I've identified where we need to be focusing a bit more attention, and we will be doing that in the coming year. We have just hired a part-time housing intern who's going to be specifically focused on the affirmatively furthering fair housing work and other programs that are associated with housing element implementation. So that will greatly bolster our human capital capacity to implement the housing element. Period. Shifting gears, in addition to policy programs, the housing element also includes quantified objectives. And so we're going to turn to that now. Oh, here it is. As you can see from the table, the city's regional housing needs allocation was a total of 558 units across all income categories. Next slide, please. If you compare our targets with our actual production, you will see that according to the city's data at mid-cycle, the city has a total of 184 units somewhere in the pipeline, of which 116 have actually been completed. So for the mid-cycle, from a total production perspective, we're right on target in terms of how much housing we're facilitating. The challenge is that we're underperforming in the very low, and moderate income categories. And that's something we'll continue to focus on in terms of supporting affordable housing to see if we can improve our production levels in these categories. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the watch list. We've been through all the policies and programs. We've taken a look at our quantified objectives and our actual production numbers. And now I'd like to spend just a few minutes to talk about the activities that should be prioritized in order to ensure that we continue to be compliant with state law. There are just 3 areas, and they offer opportunities. So I'd like for us to frame it from that optimistic perspective. The next slide, please. So I'm going to start with ADUs and JADUs. One of the things that we're not doing very well is accounting. The department's data systems are inadequate because we're kind of in an in-between space where we're still using a mix of technology and paper, and that's making it difficult for us to be good at accounting for dwelling units. It's not something that that had been focused on up until now. But improving our data systems for accurate accounting will really help us demonstrate the power of gentle density, as we like to call it. One of the opportunities that we have to address the deficit in very low, and moderate income housing production is by allocating our ADUs across that spectrum. This is one really good thing that came out of advocacy at the regional level to the state during the regional housing needs assessment process. The Southern California region, through SCAG, developed a methodology for ADUs that was approved by the state to allow jurisdictions to count ADU production across the affordability spectrum. Southern California, in turn, created subregions for refined market analysis, and the South Bay, as you can see on the following slide, landed on a specific allocation scheme. So our records suggest that we haven't yet done that sort of distribution for our housing units. So as we're building our data system, we're going to be prioritizing setting up this part of the accounting so we can move forward with it and then backtrack to accurately count the ADUs and JDUs across those income spectrums. And I'm hopeful that at our next annual progress report, when we're submitting it to the state, we'll have a better sense of how that's going to support our overall housing production numbers. Next slide, please. The next area that we need to keep an eye on, again, is this is an accounting issue. We do need to be monitoring development, specifically on sites on our housing inventory list, also known as housing element overlay sites. We need to make sure that we're not losing sites to development without housing, because for every site that gets developed without housing, we need to find another site that can accommodate the housing that was assigned to the site that was developed. Now, during the site development process, the inventory development process, the city applied the overlay zone to enough sites to create a buffer of units in different income categories. But once the buffer is exhausted, the city will need to undertake additional rezoning in order to maintain adequate sites for housing. And that is, in summary, what the concept of no net loss is according to state law. So you all, planning commissioners, may have noticed that there were one or two cases over the past couple of months where we actually included findings which were made as part of the resolution of approval, confirming that even though the site was on the inventory, the city still had adequate capacity to address the housing need. But every time we do that, we reduce our buffer. And so that's something that we're going to need to be watching much more closely moving forward. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn this one over to Madam City Attorney. I didn't quite get my slides oriented right, but I'm going to give her a moment to talk about New Commune.
We can come back as well if that works better. Or you have the podium and the mic.
Look, can you go to what? Let's do one more. No, go back. Go one more back. Slide of it on. Ooh, I lost a slide. Let's talk about affordable housing on city-owned land, and then I'll turn it over to you. City-sponsored affordable housing development in California these days is really the most reliable way to ensure affordable housing development, because you're using city-owned, municipally owned land for that public purpose. Using existing land resources that serve a public purpose or that have been determined to be surplus and able to be used for another purpose, and converting that land for housing production is important because of the state's public interest in advancing affordable housing production. So in this way, the public can use an existing resource to basically create a subsidy that allows new affordable housing to be developed. Now, during the site identification process, the city did identify a number of city-owned sites that could be appropriated for this purpose. And, kind of linking back to the earlier program area, this is one of those studies that we need to advance in the coming year. What is important to remember is that each site has an individual character. It's within an individual, in a specific neighborhood, and that neighborhood has specific attributes, whether it's associated with mobility or with adjacency to medical services or adjacency to parks or schools. And our special need populations include disabled persons, elderly persons, female-headed households, large households, and homeless persons. So one of the things you would do if you're matching populations is thinking about what population would be served with a specific site. So we're going to be, as we're advancing that program area in the coming year, you know, the universe is in Hermosa Beach, our special needs populations are varied. And so we can, as part of our site selection process, we can also identify a special needs population that we want to design for through our affordable housing project. So with that, I'll go back to New Commune and turn it over to Sarah.
All right. Good afternoon, or almost evening, Chair and Commissioners. So it's good to be with you tonight, a little bit earlier than usual. And as we've already heard from some of our public comment, the New Commune versus Redondo Beach case has been making waves throughout the state, and especially in our community, considering they are a close neighbor to us. For the record as well, and for the public in the room, my name is Sarah Laughlin. I am interim assistant city attorney through the city's city attorney office, Best and Krieger. So, looking towards this case, the case is holding, let me back up a little bit. New Commune DTLA versus LLC versus Redondo Beach was an appellate case coming out of the California Appeals Court in October. It has made its way across the state, across our community, and into the housing and redevelopment communities. It's a big topic of discussion right now because it does touch on what was until recently considered to be a very uncontroversial tool in the toolbox of many of our local jurisdictions, which is the overlay zone, which is often used to help meet those RENA allocation numbers. Again, this is a very commonly used tool. Until recently, it was very uncontroversial. We worked extensively with HCD in developing these overlay zones. And elephant in the room is that the city utilizes an overlay zone, not so much an elephant. Allison already touched on that. So we have been taking a look at this case and the holding to determine whether or not it affects the city's overlay zone and our housing element moving forward. I have highlighted kind of the three takeaways here on the screen for us, but to zoom back and kind of go through more of the history of the case, to give you all some context, revisit these three big takeaways, and then discuss really what impacts the city might be looking at moving forward. So in this case, the city of Redondo Beach submitted its draft housing element for the current planning period, the sixth cycle, to HCD in 2021. After a series of amendments, it was certified by HCD and found to be substantially compliant with housing element law. Like many local jurisdictions up and down the state, as I've mentioned, the city's housing element proposed a residential overlay zone to make up for the shortfall in existing residential sites in order to meet the city's RENA numbers. Now, a residential overlay is often used as a zoning tool to permit residential development on zones that are not currently zoned for residential use. We call that, their base zoning. So a base zoning perhaps of industrial or of commercial or other non-residential use. We can then place an overlay over these sites that would permit residential development in line with the housing element law. So plaintiff New Commune challenged the city's housing element, alleging that the housing element violated state law. In its review of the case, the California Court of Appeals reviewed the city's site inventory and housing overlay sites, and found that the city's housing element was not compliant with state housing element law. As of today, unfortunately, Redondo Beach's housing element is decertified. And that holding was based on the fact that some overlay sites still maintain this base zoning of commercial and industrial with no requirement for residential development. This is the part of the case that is very new to us in the housing and development community, and what will affect many jurisdictions moving forward. So as I mentioned previously, the overlay zone is a very popular, commonly used tool to assist cities in meeting their arena numbers. It is something that our city currently utilizes. And we utilize that because the state requires us, when we don't have existing residential sites that are adequate to meet our arena numbers, it requires us to go through a rezoning program. The rezoning must close the gap between the number of units allowed under the current zoning and the number of units required by RENA. Looking specifically to the Redondo Beach case, the appellate court took a specific look at housing overlay sites that, again, maintained this base zoning with no residential use. I believe a few of these specific sites that it looked at, for example, included parking lots or grocery stores. Sites that were currently being used for non-residential uses. So first, looking at our second bullet point here, but our first big takeaway, the court found that the city's overlay permitted non-residential development in housing element overlay sites, which conflicts with the minimum residential density required by state law. Now, again, this is the part of the case that is really new to us in the community. Whereas HCD have formally allowed housing element overlays to permit this base zoning, the state came in, the appeals court came in and said, because that base zoning doesn't require any residential component, city, you are not meeting the required residential density under state law, which is 20 units per acre. So what does this mean moving forward? It means that sites that currently are developed or zoned for commercial or industrial or other non-residential uses within a city's overlay zone will likely need to be rezoned to require residential development. The second big takeaway here was that the city's overlay violated the required balance between non-residential and or mixed uses and residential uses within the housing inventory site. So in order to provide an adequate balance between residential use and mixed-use sites or non-residential sites within the overlay, the state requires that at least 50% of lower-income housing units be in a zone that is residential only and prohibits non-residential use. In the alternative, state housing law also permits that lower-income units be in a mixed-use zone if at least 50% of the floor area is dedicated to housing. So you can have one of these two paths. One is that out of all of the sites, we only allow 50% to be in a zone that allows non-residential uses. The other path is that we will allow mixed use for lower-income sites, but the mixed use is limited to no more than 50% of the floor area ratio of those developments. The court held that the city failed to utilize either one of those pathways, again, pointing back to this base zoning. And I'm talking about base zoning because that is the big takeaway, because the base zoning did not permit any residential or allowed non-residential use for the entire lot, these sites couldn't meet their required at least 50% residential use for redevelopment. And because of the number of sites that were identified with a base zoning of non-residential use, the city couldn't meet its entire program threshold of at least 50% of these sites being zoned in areas that were residential only. So now our third takeaway is that Redondo Beach came back to the appellate court and basically said, well, HCD certified us. They took a look at our housing element, we worked with them, we went through many rounds of amendments, and they found that we are compliant. Therefore, you should rely on HCD's determination and provide them with some deference. And the court came back and said no. The court is still the final arbiter of state law, and it found that it has the equal ability, even in the face of HD certification, to review a housing element and to find it out of compliance with state law, if it is in fact out of compliance with state law. So, what does this mean now for the city? as I mentioned, the city does utilize a housing element overlay. I want to highlight very specifically, as Allison already mentioned, we have a compliant housing element, and that has not changed. This case only decertified Redondo Beach's housing element. So to the extent that folks are perhaps worried about builder's remedy applications or any other challenges to our housing element, I want to highlight and make sure that you're all aware that we are still in compliance. That being said, we are taking a look in conjunction with the city attorney's office, with the community development office, and with the city manager on our current site inventory list to determine if we need to make any improvements. As was already mentioned, we do need to keep an eye on our existing sites to make sure that our numbers continue to stay adequate. Within that analysis, we are also looking to see whether we need to add additional sites or perhaps rezone existing sites in order to ensure that we continue to stay in compliance with state law. We will be making recommendations to, if and when, we will be making recommendations to the City Council on some of those strategies, and we will keep you all informed, of course. So I also want to note that the next housing element cycle is fast approaching, even though 2029 is our end date for this cycle. That seems far away, and yet in the housing world, it is not very far away. So we are also, as we develop and get into our planning cycle for the 7th housing element cycle now, we will, of course, have an eye towards this case when we develop or amend our housing element inventory site as required. And now zooming out even a little bit further, Redondo Beach, word on the street, word in the development circles is that Redondo Beach does anticipate appealing this decision. So you may not yet have heard the last out of the California Supreme Court on this or out of Redondo Beach. We also have not heard from HCD or the state in general regarding any kind of policy changes. So we are still very much in an area of kind of the unknown where we're taking a look at all of the different actors here and we're watching what they're doing, and we may not yet have a completely settled case. So I also wanted to bring that to your attention. And of course, as things continue to develop, we will continue to keep you updated. I can take any questions at this point on this, and I'm sure as well Allison can take any questions about the larger presentation. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say this does conclude our presentation. We have another presentation on land value recapture. And so, at your discretion, we can either move into land value recapture and complete the presentation portion if you so desire, or we can pause here and answer any questions you might have. It's really up to you.
I think it would be valuable to pause here and ask some questions and then pick it up with the land value recapture.
Sure.
Okay. I will see if anyone, my fellow commissioners have questions for staff. Commissioner McNally?
None at this time.
Commissioner Hoffman?
I feel like the guy that's driving 80 when the guy next to him gets pulled over by the highway patrol. And I don't know whether I should hit the brakes and change lanes and call attention to myself. I should keep going 80 and pretend nothing happened. And I'm driving into an unknown zone here. I'm listening to you and thinking about, well, what I'm hearing is we're going to have to go back. There's no other way. I don't want to get off on my attitude about the state's involvement here. But there's no other way we're going to be able to accommodate the kind of RENA numbers that are given without changing the zoning of virtually every site that's certainly in the overlay and identifying others. And what that's probably going to require is that we're going to have to create a mixed-use zone that meets all those requirements, that 50% of the floor area has to be, go down that list. We can do that. So for me tonight, especially anticipating the next presentation, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to respond to a land value program that is focused, and the issues seem to be focused on exactly those small lots that are probably going to be rezoned anyway. And so like I say, I don't know whether to hit the brakes. I don't know whether to turn and go down a different road. I don't know what to do. And with all due, and I don't mean you, but I mean, the courts have common law. There's one case. I assume there are going to be others. I assume there's somebody out there, there's got to be somebody out there, some big developer, that's going down a list of how many communities have overlays like this that we'd be interested in developing it. And again, not to anticipate probably crossing Hermosa off, well, they got that land value, we're not going to go there, when we can go to some of these other communities where the same opportunity is going to exist. So I guess I'm expressing frustration as much as I'm expressing a question. You're our director. You're our legal advisor. Tell me what to do. Do I put the brakes on? Do I hit the blinker? Do I turn on a different road? Do I just keep going thinking I should pretend like the world is fine?
Well, so if you're on the 110, general speed of travel is at least 75 miles per hour in most lanes. So if you're going at 80, you're only a little bit ahead of the curve or of the pack. You're within range, right? And so I would say, again, based on my experience, seems to me like the city of Hermosa Beach is doing quite well in terms of housing element implementation. And that's really what I tried to underscore in my presentation. It's not just the housing production numbers, it's 13 programs that the city committed to working on, all of which have shown progress. So the fact that there are that there are areas where we're not quite at speed doesn't, in my view, create a threat of decertification. We are also, as the city attorney mentioned, one of probably hundreds of jurisdictions across the state of California who relied on HCD's guidance when we selected the rezoning strategy that we selected. And so, it may well be that after the holidays, it's not unusual for HCD to kind of start the year off with a bang and issue, some sort of formal guidance in response to this, in response to this court case. And we'll be ready for that, right? I mean, it's our duty to prepare for a variety of different scenarios, and then understand the landscape and be diligent in the work that we're doing to implement the housing element. I think the other important point that the city attorney just mentioned was the reality that even though I wasn't thinking about it as I was preparing this, as I was reading my presentation, I'm like, wow, this is the mid-cycle assessment. Like literally, as of next year, right, as we move into 2026, we will be beyond the midpoint. And so what we really will be doing is starting to think about the seventh cycle. In addition to thinking about the seventh cycle, as was discussed in the housing element, and you raised it before, we did commit to explore additional rezonings in the mixed use, creating a mixed use zone that could be applied to new areas. So all of those activities together, in my mind, create a roadmap for continued compliance with state law, kind of maintained certification of our housing element, with an eye towards, what our seventh cycle is going to look like.
Allison, and again, the context from which I'm presenting this is what the state has asked us to do. And forgive me for, I sound as cynical as this does. I feel a little bit now like, to make another bad metaphor, or like we're the coach of the Raiders. We've done all the drills, every one of those programs. We've done all the drills we're supposed to do. They're all in great shape. We're making progress. But then, as you said, the empirical evidence shows me we scored twice. Out of 380-some applications, we scored 2 points that count towards the score. The state's looking at us, you got to give me 300 plus affordable units below moderate, and we got 2. We've done it. The programs are great. Gee, you should have seen them at practice. And yet the reality is we're not doing well. If we're halfway through this halftime and we're in the locker room, I don't know what the pep talk is that I tell the guys, you're doing great. We're been outscored 370 to 2, and we've got to get to 500. The opponents have got 500. That's the goal they've set for.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like the Raiders.
The RENA numbers are targets, and our obligation is to plan. Our obligation through one of our programs, can't remember what number it is, we did field a couple of public sites that we said we were going to advance for affordable housing development. I feel that that is kind of, again, another metaphor, low-hanging fruit. If you really want to demonstrate the city's commitment to advance, housing opportunities for all in town, what we can do, what is in our control, is fielding one of those sites for development. We cannot control what neighbor X does on his property. We cannot control what any of those property owners who 4 years ago said they would be interested in having their properties on an inventory. We can't control that. What we can control is what we said we would do on lands which are owned by the city. And if there is a deep concern about not producing affordable units in town, that's a very concrete step that we can take.
Thank you.
And when you say there's a deep concern about doing it, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
I said if.
The market is suggesting to me that nobody's interested in that, or virtually nobody's interested in that, and yet we're being mandated to do that. And the solution, and Mr. Flaherty's the expert on this, he could tell us every site in town the city owns and how it's used and what its potential is. I'm not sure in my own mind, is off the top of my head, the only property that the city has that I would classify as underutilized is right next door. Am I forgetting something, Mike?
No, and that one is on the list.
Yeah.
That one is on the list. The city, again, this could be a topic of much further discussion if the commission desires in the upcoming year. But I'd encourage us not to get bogged down in the numbers and kind of get, clearly there's a level of frustration with this. Well, no one is producing affordable housing. No, affordable housing developers produce affordable housing. And that's a certain production model that requires a certain set of circumstances, and the way that you engage affordable housing developers in a small town with high land values is by issuing a request for proposals for city-owned land. And that starts the ball rolling. That acquaints them with the town, that acquaints them with the administrative process, that acquaints everybody with what it takes to put a project together. And if there's an appetite to do that, we advance that.
Any more questions? Okay. Commissioner Flaherty?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for your presentation. And eventually, if you could forward that, your actual document to us, I would appreciate it. That's a good outline.
Sure.
I do have some, you mentioned the ADUs. Pete and I were on the commission a dozen years ago, him a lot more than that. But one of the things was our RENA numbers were a handful. I mean, we were looking at 1 year, and looked at 2 units we had to produce. Now we're at 500 and some. So the ADU issue really, I think, makes sense. Are you able to capture ADUs who are built outside a certain date? Because ADUs have been built in this city, even though, okay.
No, we can't count them. We can't count them as new if we find them in the wild. We can only count them if they're constructed.
Well,
during the
I'm
cycle.
talking about ones that were constructed but outside the new time zone.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have a certain records, the new clock started, let's just say 4 years ago or 3 years.
2021.
Yes. You can count them based on your records here, and that's what you're in the process of, and also categorizing them as low, moderate, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
And those numbers, in the deep of your mind, you have a feel for any number that would produce.
I'm not going to venture a guess.
Yeah, okay, you got it. Then, any one subject matter, and we're going to jump into the land recovery. If you took on that subject matter, or any subject matter, what's your time frame from start to finish? From the time you develop a package for us, the time it goes through us, the time it gets approved by the council, all that, what is the typical time frame? 4 months, 5 months?
No. Could be, let's just take the mixed-use zone and an assessment of
Yep.
additional areas for mixed-use zoning. That's easily a year. That's easily a year after a consultant is hired. So it's, as you all experienced going through the preparation of the housing element, kind of when you're standing up new programs and policies, it takes quite a lot of time.
Okay. That's all for right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Isant? None? Okay. Just a couple quick questions. I think the housing element number is 558. We're showing 384 in terms of progress. Do we have to be counting those? Are those net new? And do we have to be counting them as net new units?
We have presented the numbers as net new,
This is net new. Okay.
according to the reports that the city has submitted to HCD.
Okay. Thank you. And just actually to step back for a second, to echo what my fellow commissioners have said, thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting and useful for us to understand where we're tracking. So I appreciate the effort put into it. I'm curious, will we get further updates of this? Or should we expect cadence to be like annually or biannually in terms of how we hear about how we're tracking towards the housing element? What are your thoughts?
Would welcome suggestions on that. I think in a perfect world, using, so every year the city has to present their annual progress report to HCD, and the deadline is April 15th, or is that taxes? Somewhere around there, right? Early April, you have to submit every year. So ideally, we would couple the technical report that gets uploaded into their big database with a presentation and update on the progress, because that's essentially what we're doing it. Unfortunately, the massive spreadsheets that we're required to prepare for HCD are not terribly friendly or good at telling stories. So it would be good to do that, and we would be happy to do that.
I think it would be great to at least hear annually how we're progressing towards the housing element. And I think if you're suggesting April is when you present it to the state, before or after, it sounds like the right timing for me. Okay, great. In terms of the current housing element and the unit counts, you said we had buffer, but every time we approve a project that doesn't have housing or the housing that was on the list, we kind of eat into that buffer. Do you know where that buffer stands today?
I'm not going to venture a guess. Again, I've disclosed that our kryptonite at the moment is our accounting systems, and we're really working diligently to get those numbers. And as we move forward, perhaps by April of this year, we'll be sure to let you know. Because again, we don't really have an option of not rezoning. Like if we hit the red, then we must, and so it's an urgent activity for us to get the numbers sorted out.
Mm-hmm. I think this is my last question. So we met you in the report. You guys mentioned, we're halfway through our current housing element, looking forward to 2029 when we have to get recertified. I suspect that we will start that process before 2029. It has to be certified in 2029. Do we know when the state is going to give us their RENA requirements?
So typically RENA, the state and the region will begin having those conversations, I would say, within the next 12 to 18 months. Right, that whole process will be happening, and then guidance will come out from HCD, let's just say in 2027, right? So by mid-2027, we're going to have the roadmap for what they're looking for, and then you're coupling that with whatever the RENA allocation is, and you're launching your process. So, right now, just, not to get off topic, but just to elaborate, we also have an urgent need to complete the zoning code update that was set aside as we were working on the housing element. So ideally, we have 2026 and 2027 to complete the zoning code update before we launch into our housing element update or the 7th cycle preparation. But that's a lot of advanced planning. I think there was a member of the public who was asking about resources. And one of the things we need to be mindful of is that this sort of technical work requires a certain skill set, a certain, type of planner or planners. And so we are, looking actively at strategies to address that so we can be successful.
All right, thank you. Director, I will look to you for guidance in terms of next steps here, because we have this as one item, and we have the item number 2 for the land value recapture. You suggested doing that presentation kind of right immediately. So should I be opening this to public comment on this item and then we close that and go to the next item, or how?
So at this point, given that we've had a chance to have dialogue, the requested action on the report is to receive and file. If you wanted to take public comment, if there are public comments on this particular item after the presentation and the prior, we could take them now and then just move on to
Okay.
land value recapture.
All right, let's do that then. All right, so then I will open it up to public comment. If we have anyone in chambers, please approach the podium and state your name. Reminder, you have 3 minutes.
I won't speak that long. John David, first of all, thanks, Allison. That was really great. Before I go into all my comments on this, is that I just want you all to know what a great job she does. I've met with her a lot of times. We've met with her with other property owners, and I think we got a star. I do have a question for Allison. Is the ADU safe harbor law, which allows us to allocate low income and very low income and moderate to ADUs. I think it's really valuable for us to meet arena numbers. I was really surprised at the last APR. Before Allison came, we had 7 ADUs and none were allocated. They were all market rate. So I was really surprised about it. So I'm very curious if we could retroactively go back to 2024 and just say, whoops, we made a mistake. And if at least we can grab some of those. So that would be my first question. My second comment is with regards to the overlays and the 50% requirement for residential, that we already embedded that into our code, into our zoning code. So our mixed use code actually required us to have 50%. And I don't know I can't remember exact law, but a lot of this also applies to very low or lower income. That was the whole thing. A lot of it, Redondo Beach was lower income, but not market rate or moderate. What else? As far as Professor Hoffman, as far as your comment of not addressing land value capture because maybe it prevents a big developer from coming in, I think it does exactly the opposite. I don't want to go into details. You can speak if you'd like, but the land value capture program creates infeasibility with updates that happen on sites of 10 or fewer, with the definitional changes of housing for low, very low, and moderate income. And so we automatically, and the Cosman study showed that, so we kind of automatically created a problem with it. And the other thing is, if I was a big developer and I wanted to go in and build 50 units, it's easy to attack the land value capture program. They just have to prove infeasibility, and the burden's on you guys. So, what else? Coastal Commission. I think it's really important. I know it's kind of now, we got more important things we're dealing with, but we've been dealing with it forever. So I'd like to see us moving forward with that. And my last comment is we just need to be realistic with this. We're never going to do that amount of low-income units. That's for certain. It's just not going to happen. I do think we have to give it a good try. But our programs have to be realistic. So I'll address that in the next land value capture, but it has to be based in realism, or you get what you get. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, David Graythan, Hermosa Beach, 8th Street. I'll react to some of the things I heard in the presentation, the discussion, a couple of specifics. Chair Hirsch, you may have been getting at this question. I don't know if it was about the sort of net zero thing, where if we develop properties differently than they were in the overlay, and maybe the answer was we'll get the answer later. Just anecdotally, I think I recall a property roughly by the old telephone building, roughly 900 First Street, and as I recall, I think that was one sort of good-sized fish that may have gotten away from us, so to speak. I remember kind of lamenting over that. They may have been grandfathered in for some reason or not. So I know that we have had some cases where we're going to have some catching up to do with that, and I would be interested in knowing how extensive that is when we have the data. I was also, it might have been program 9. There was a program that was among the highlighted programs that we need to get going on as part of our fortifying our status. And it had something with mixed use. And the question I was going to ask, and it may be moot, and we'll answer it later, was how is it's about mixed use. And I was trying to understand how that's different from the housing element overlay, and the extent to which it would overlap or be completely separate. Are there different objectives with that? I don't really know what that's about. I suppose I can go read the housing element and find out for myself there. But so I was just trying to understand what that was. And then just generally speaking, I can't resist kind of hopping on the metaphor bandwagon here about the going down the highway. And I think the thing is to kind of keep going at the speed we're going at. We need to be kind of looking around us as to, what adjustments we might have to make. But just to have a little fun with it, I think if you slam on the brakes, you might get rear-ended. And what I mean by that is something bad might happen. Maybe what would happen is we just found out that we were prematurely spending a lot of effort on plans and activities that in the end we find out aren't even really going where we need to go. I think that no matter what happens, there's always going to be some unknowns around the corner. Unfortunately, this just seems to be an ongoing thing. But for us to go out of our way to overly anticipate and then put a lot of work into something that may turn out that the state throws something completely different at us, I don't think that would be really productive. So that's my thoughts on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll see if there's anyone online.
There are 3 online guests wishing to speak.
If you can just please state your name.
Tony, you may speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to be kind of blunt, but forgive me. Look, Commissioner Hoffman nailed it when he said we did all the right drills in practice, but we were getting, he didn't say this, blown out 370-2 in the low-income housing game. And Coach Becker is telling us not to get caught up in the numbers. I just don't know. We didn't get a clear answer on the HCD decertification risks. And the fact that at this point in the game, we don't know how much of a buffer we have remaining in each income category is simply astounding to me. It's astounding. Maybe you all can mull that over a little bit. Maybe I'm overreacting, and if so, I apologize. I thought the presentation was well paced and good, but there are unanswered questions. Also, now I'm putting my real bitch hat on. There wasn't, it may have been unintentional, but the characterization that the community objection to ADUs and JADUs was primarily a function of natural resistance to change couldn't be further from the truth. The resistance was based on the fact that there's very little on-site parking and they get parking exemptions. And population growth in areas where residential collector roads are already overloaded and we're subject to daily long stop sign queues. It was more things like that than just general resistance to change. And that kind of spin that it was just resistance to change doesn't really help. I recognize, and I have been the beneficiary of Ms. Becker's competence and hard work. So I don't want to ignore that, but work needs to be done. That's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you.
Laura Pena.
Laura, you may speak. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, Chair, Director, and staff. I appreciate you bringing the report forward. I would have been in chambers today, but unfortunately my voice decided to give out today. So I will try to speak as clearly as I can. As I look at the annual progress report, or this implementation status report, excuse me, it's important for all of us to speak very candidly about where the city is making progress and where we need to accelerate it. The statement that overall implementation is progressing well captures part of the picture, but there are several indicators in the development pipeline paired with implementation delays identified in the report that suggest we need a deeper, more transparent assessment. We are not alone. Many cities or small cities are struggling with similar issues. This is not a criticism of staff. These are challenges that are structural, not personal. But if we want to stay compliant, keep local control, and avoid state intervention, we need clarity about what is working and what needs attention. A few key areas. First, which units counted toward RENA are actually coming from the RENA sites identified in the housing element? If they are mostly coming from non-RENA sites, why? Understanding site-by-site progress will help us gauge whether our rezoned areas are functioning as intended. If you expand mixed-use zoning in our commercial areas, but there's no bite in our current ones, you need to understand why. Commissioner Hoffman's comment about only scoring 2, if he's talking about the 2 VLIs, the very low income, those applicants were submitted in 2024 with no traction or entitlement in the status report. Why? Second, what barriers are zone-based, coastal, economic, or procedural are discouraging more applications? We need to understand what is happening on the ground. Third, how do today's plan check and permitting timelines compare to what the city reported to HCD? It's very important that if there are bottlenecks in the system, we need to clear them. And finally, why are housing element programs behind schedule by some over 2 years? What corrective actions or additional resources do we need to apply to meet deadlines before the next APR? For example, the CUP streamlining is in the policy plan stating completion by end of 2024. It's now 2026. For each of these questions, it's intended to strengthen and not criticize. Hopefully this will help identify solutions, remove obstacles, streamline review, and build a clear action plan. If these issues are not addressed in a timely manner before the city submits its APR, our city may face unintended consequences and challenges none of us want. I'm confident that with transparency and data-driven decision-making and continued collaboration, like maybe a development review subcommittee like our economic development strategy suggested years ago, between staff, the commission, and community stakeholders, our city can stay ahead of the challenges, maintain local control over how and where housing is developed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen, you may speak.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this informative presentation. I apologize, my comments might be better geared towards the public comment versus on the specifics of this, but I'd just like to speak in favor of the low-income housing numbers you mentioned and first highlight why I think they're needed. So in Hermosa Beach, it just seems like traffic patterns are backwards. I was looking at the Plan Hermosa document, and 90% of the 4,800 folks who work in Hermosa Beach commute from outside Hermosa Beach. To contrast that, 80% of our residents commute by car out of the city for their work. So not only does this add to car traffic and parking burden in our city, but these figures highlight that working here does not pay a wage for folks to live here. These are the people that make Hermosa Hermosa, that work day to day in our shops and restaurants, that keep our cities going. Workers are the backbone of our town. Allowing them to live here would reduce the traffic and enable them to enjoy the town that they contribute towards. So I'd just like to throw my hat in the ring and look into a couple creative solutions that might help us get housing density. The first is adopting residential over retail. after the extensive comments about overlay zoning, I don't know if it would be allowed or if it would be permitted per California laws like SB 6 or AB 2011. I'd defer to the experts on this. But residential over retail is how many cities standardly operate in Europe and on the East Coast. Encourages community, local shopping, walkability, reduces traffic, contributes to the feel of the city. I would personally love to live over Mickey's, for example. And then another solution, which is actually being adopted in some form in Redondo Beach. They're looking at reducing parking minimum requirements. Redondo Beach on Artesian Aviation is doing that with non-residential building. But if we were to do that with residential building here, it would be able to make buildings more affordable for those who don't have cars. And it would also add density without adding as much height because they wouldn't have to account for having a parking garage on the ground level. And I think that as the region expands public transit with projects like the Sea Line extension of Torrance, the need for cars would be reduced in the coming years. So I'm not sure that the parking requirements would be as needed as we look to the future. So just want to reiterate again, thank you for the work you've been doing, and also thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you.
There are no further online guest speakers.
Okay. Do any of my fellow commissioners have further questions of staff before we close the public comment portion of the hearing?
No.
No? Okay. I will close the public comment portion of the hearing and bring back the matter back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. Does anybody want to deliberate any further, or do I have a motion to, or make a motion to adopt the plan?
Move staff rec to receive and file.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can I have a vote?
Commissioner McNally,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Aye.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Izant,
Yes.
Chairperson Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5B, discussion of land value recapture ordinance, a program of the 2021 to 2029 certified housing element, case number 25-CDD-077. Do we have a staff report?
We do. I'll just wait a second for, okay. So I'm pinch hitting for Alexis Oropeza, so excuse me if I'm not quite as prepared for this one. But tonight we're here to discuss the land value recapture ordinance, specifically as it relates to small lots. At the March 25th City Council meeting, Council directed staff to bring this matter to you for review and recommendation. So tonight we're asking the Planning Commission to receive the staff report, hear input from the public, and then make a recommendation to City Council through staff on if and how to proceed. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to start with the basics. Land value recapture is founded on a straightforward principle that when the city takes specific actions that increase a property's value, such as rezoning, a portion of that increased value should be captured for public benefit, particularly, in this case, affordable housing. This is one of the key policy programs in our 2021-2029 housing element, which was adopted to address the city's affordable housing needs. Next slide, please. The City Council adopted the Land Value Recapture Ordinance January 23, 2024, and it became effective on August 1st, 2024, when the housing element was certified by state HCD. Importantly, HCD emphasized in their certification letter that they expected timely and effective implementation of all programs, including land value recapture. The HCD letter also established an expectation that we evaluate this program biannually, every 2 years. So in fact, this review is not only responsive to council direction, but also aligns with HCD expectations. Next slide, please. So here's how our LVR ordinance is structured. It applies to properties on our housing element inventory that were rezoned HE overlay. These properties previously were zoned for non-residential uses only, but the overlay now allows residential and mixed-use development. When these properties develop residential projects, they must either include affordable units or pay an LVR fee. The fee is waived if the development includes 15% very low, 15% low, or 25% moderate income units. Next slide, please. Council established a two-tier fee structure designed to recognize the difference between smaller and larger development parcels. For Tier 1, lots with 4 or fewer units have a fee of $76 per square foot, and Tier 2 for lots with 5 or more units, $104 per square foot. The fees were calculated to equal the cost of creating affordable housing on site. Revenue collected goes towards developing affordable housing locally, either through development subsidies, converting existing units to affordable housing, or even contributing to the South Bay Regional Housing Trust Fund. Next slide, please. So the fee structure was intentionally designed to incentivize building affordable housing rather than paying a fee. For this reason, council imposed costs higher than originally proposed in the Cosmont Company's analysis. That analysis showed that even with a Tier 1 fee, small lot developments could maintain approximately 12% return on investment, which was deemed financially viable for typical developers. Next slide, please. As of August 2025, the housing element was certified for a year, and we're in the 5th year now of implementing our housing element. And the city has continued making progress on new housing units, but all of the new units remain market rate. To date, no entitlement applications have been submitted on housing element overlay sites that either include affordable units or require payment of LVR fees. Next slide, please. So the small lots, the Tier 1 lots, represent a significant portion of our HE overlay inventory, comprising 25% essentially of the 558 units that we're responsible for accommodating during the housing element cycle. So if you break that down by income category, the small lots account for about 16 very low income units, 27 low income units, 84 moderate income units, and 10 above moderate units for a total of 137 units. Next slide, please. So staff is presenting 5 possible recommendations for your consideration tonight. The Planning Commission may also take some other action or make another recommendation. Option A would be to maintain the current regulations without change and commit to a reevaluation next fall, perhaps with an updated economic feasibility analysis. Option B, exempt the smallest lots, those with minimum density of 1 or 2 units, from any required LVR fee. Another option, direct staff to assess the economic feasibility of additional fee tiers within the small lot category. Option D, direct staff to explore zoning regulations that could encourage residential development on small lots from the inventory. And last but not least, implement a temporary 18-month fee reduction for projects building to minimum required density on small lots, and then actively promote that program to affected property owners. Next slide, please. So as you think about it tonight, we'd like to encourage you to think specifically about a couple of things. The project has been, the program has been in effect for 1 year, and there hasn't been any uptake on overlay sites. We heard about that at the last item. Now, this could be market conditions. It could be feasibility, it could be timing. There's lots of reasons beyond a simple fee, which may be causing the no uptake. We also intentionally designed the fees to incentivize on-site affordable housing construction instead of paying a fee. So they are structured in a way to deliver units instead of collect fees. And finally, the other thing to just bear in mind is that the small lots in our land inventory do account for almost a quarter of the total RENA number. Next slide, please. So following tonight's discussion, your recommendation, will present your recommendations back to City Council. It may also be necessary to consult with HCD to make sure that we're not triggering a mid-cycle revision, which would necessitate formal review from HCD. And at this time, this concludes my staff report. We can open the public comment unless you have questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will start with seeing if any of my fellow commissioners have questions for staff on the presentation, and I will start this way. So I'll start with Commissioner Flaherty.
Could you define small lots a little more than tier 1, tier 2? Could you give me a square footage or a size of some sort?
I'd say less than 3,000.
Less than 3,000. As a typical lot on Upper Pier Avenue, what's the square footage?
I am sure there is at least one property owner who could say, but off the top of my head, I cannot.
Okay, I'll ask him when he comes to the mic. Is there? I'm good for right now, thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Izant.
Just a couple of questions of clarification. Before the overlay zone was put on, and let's use Upper Pier Avenue as an example, maybe even 411 Pier Avenue or something like that. But one of those nice businesses. They had certain rights based on the zoning that we had there at the time. Now, did that zoning allow them, if they wanted to build a second story and then put in something such as office space or walk-up services or something?
Yes.
And with the overlay, that has not changed. They still have that right to do non-housing on a second-story level if they so deem it financially feasible.
Correct.
If the fee was entirely eliminated for small lots and they wanted to build residential, are they just allowed to then build market rate residential? Or are they required to build, let's call it lower moderate income residential, and sell it for that particular price or rent it for that price based on the LA County guidelines for cost versus income? That's really a two-part question, I guess. Sorry.
It is, and it's a provocative question. I'm not sure I have a full answer. The housing inventory, the sites in inventory, as we talked about in the last on the last item, it does kind of allocate units across properties, right? So there is a likelihood, as I just mentioned, that at any particular site might have allocated a low-income unit on it in which case the city would encourage the production of a unit which was consistent with what had been allocated. But I'm not clear, maybe this is a city attorney question, I'm not clear if we could compel the production of a low-income unit that's been allocated to a particular parcel.
Counselor, can you weigh in on that, or?
I believe Director Becker's first impression is correct. There's not much the city can do to compel unless, for example, we have an existing deed restriction or we're looking at other mechanisms under different areas of state law, such as the no loss of affordable units under state law requirement, which we have discussed here before. Otherwise, much like Director Becker already mentioned, the housing element is a planning and policy document, and we can very heavily encourage folks, especially folks who have said that they have no problem being on a site's inventory list. We can, very heavily encourage them to build that affordable housing, but truly, the city is very limited in its ability to compel that kind of construction. And I think that's, one of the motivations behind the LVR program, which is before you tonight.
All right, so just to paraphrase what I thought I heard you say, in that Upper Pier area, if the landlord, if they did not have the the recapture, land value recapture, and they wanted to build housing on their second level, the city cannot compel them, and they are able to go ahead and build market rate housing. Is that at least a preliminary assessment? I'll say preliminary because time may cause a reevaluation, but for tonight, for this moment.
And I appreciate you translating my legalese into one sentence that makes sense. Yes, that is correct.
No further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner McNally?
Since the land value recapture ordinance was stated, have we had enforced in any way? Has there been anyone who's moved forward with a property under these circumstances?
That has paid a fee, no. That
And
has developed
do we
a
have-
mixed-use project, no.
And do we have any applications or anybody we would believe would be motivated to do it under these circumstances?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Excuse me, to follow up on Commissioner Eizan's question, I mean, that's in a sense exactly what the land value captures program has, these tiers and charges, is to encourage the development of that, but we can't mandate it, right? I mean, if you build affordable, you don't pay this, that's the whole point. But with regard to that, the question of how we calculated that fee, $76, well, that's the cost it would be to construct affordable housing or low-income housing or whatever. That can't, if that's the case, then we really need to revise this. When we did the calculations, Commissioner Rice was on here, Commissioner Peterson was on here, both of which commented on this. I mean, we were talking, and I remember asking specifically one of the realtor developers that was in town, give me a figure for the cost of construction of, and he said $400. Well, now I'm reading everything's telling me at least $600 if we're building market rate housing. $76 can't amount to, I don't know what that figure, where that came from now, nor 100 for that matter. So if nothing else, it seems to me we're compelled to look at those figures given, and I guess that's why, everything says we need to look at this on a periodic level. Those numbers don't make sense anymore. If they're really serious about it, we're going to use those to construct. If, for example, the city were to designate a property to build housing in some kind of a public-private partnership or whatever, if our contribution is $76 a square foot, we're not meeting probably half the cost of that construction. Or am I misunderstanding these figures?
I don't think you're misunderstanding the figures, and thank you for just kind of creating a spotlight on the point. I mean, if in the construction, the last 2 years have seen incredible changes in the construction market. Price escalations are very common. Tariffs are, kind of creating impacts. I mean, there's the economic environment has changed considerably since the fees were set. I think one of the ways to think about a pot of funds for affordable housing development is that public subsidies never entirely cover the cost of an affordable housing unit. So what you're really looking to fill is the delta, right? The difference between what can be raised from reliable sources and then what's missing. And so in the case of the fees that have been established, clearly at this point, you would be looking to use those fees in that way.
Just one question. Can you refresh on the fee structure, the 76 and the 104, I believe? Yeah. That's based on a per square foot for the entirety of the project or for just the residential component of the project?
Ooh. Do you know that? I'm going to ask, what do you call for assistance from a friend? What is that? There's a game that does that. What do you think, Jake?
I'll get it.
Sure. So we have set a fee structure. Tier 1 projects are charged $76 per square foot. Tier 2 are $104 per square foot. We're talking about this in commercial zones that would incorporate mixed-use projects. Mm-hmm. Is the fee structure based on the residential portion of the program only or on the entire redevelopment program?
Go quick look into that. If you have any further questions, I can come back to that.
Okay. I don't have further questions. So I guess right now we can, unless anyone else has further questions, we can open it up for the public comment portion of the hearing. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes, so please state your name when you approach the podium.
Before we start, can I answer the question without giving up my time?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Ask a question. That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Your question was about Upper Pier and the size of the lots. Mm-hmm. So specifically, I think almost every lot up there, at least on the north side, is 3,300 square feet. For the site element, the site, what do you call it? Site
Housing element.
The site inventory and the housing element, ones that were able to be consolidated because they're under single ownership. So if you have multiple sites under single ownership, they had an allocation, so they could be 9,000 square feet, and they had allocations of moderate. There are some sites up there that are 3,200 square feet under single ownership, and those are on the housing element for market rate. So they're still part of the program, which I don't think they should be, but they're on for market rate because HCD said that's not allowable. They wouldn't let us put it on for anything but market. So, the building, the amount. It's the 76 and the 104, I think it is only for the new square footage. So, okay, you can start the clock.
Now we'll start the clock.
Sounds great. It's getting late. I got my glasses.
And I don't know if you stated your name, so for the record.
Oh, yeah, sure. John David. So I just want to say I do have a prepared speech. I'm frustrated with the mandates from Sacramento. Broadsword, they don't make any sense. But I'm also frustrated with the land value capture and the way it was implemented. It's also as detached as from reality as the state mandates. It makes 4 false assumptions. First is that there's high demand from commercial property owners. Second is it's a windfall. There's a windfall to commercial property owners that can be captured without collapsing demand. Number 3 is the public needs to capture the benefit from rezoning, and that's all about equity. The fourth is that the program is a paper exercise and can be detached from reality. I think Read on the Beach showed the opposite. So I'm going to address each of those sequentially. I don't know if you can hear me. One is there was demand. Back in 2022, 2023, there was demand. The LVR program collapsed it. I know people that had applications that were ready to go, all excited about it. Program happened, done, wastebasket. You cannot overcome the lack of demand or inertia unless you give people a reason to do it. You need carrots, not sticks. We're never going to make those numbers without carrots. So the other thing is the windfall. It's really easy to look at rising residential property rates, property values, and assume commercial properties are going to line up for that. Unless you're standing in their shoes, ask questions openly, it's a nice but false narrative. You cannot ignore the economic reality, especially in the postage stamp size lots in the coastal zones with existing uses. You can't expect to add big additional fees, or in many cases, any additional fees that size that, and expect it's not going to collapse demand. The other part is the the value capture. I think we need to be clear. The rezoning was compliant zoning. It was to remain local control. It's something that we had to do. The public got value through those rezoning, and they'll continue to get value through property taxes. And the last is paper exercise. I don't think I have to go into that because we already know that. Truth is, we're never going to meet our RHNA goals. I shouldn't say never, but I don't see how it's possible to meet particularly our lower income RHNA goals. We still have to try, but we need carrots, not sticks. In the real world, you know this, Commissioner Hurst, low-income housing gets built through density bonus, tax incentives, government financing, government partnerships. They don't get built through land value recapture. And those only work on very large sites, all that, except for the density bonus, which, by the way, the small lots, the very small lots can't, they're not eligible for that. The small properties, they have unique challenges, and they need tailwinds, not headwinds. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're just opening up the door for big developers, because if a small property owners can't do anything with them, and big developers come in and say, hey, I can do something, I can consolidate, I'm afraid we're going to lose the character of our downtown, and I don't think anybody wants that to happen. So, as I said before, is HCD would not allow us to use our very small lots under single ownership for affordable housing. That's why they're there for market rate. If you look on the site map, there's a little bunch of green on Upper Pier. That's all market rate because that's all that is reasonable. And for some reason, Hermosa Beach has to say it is reasonable. So tonight, I urge you to remove the small lots, the very small lots from the program. This is what City Council had expressed and was originally recommended by the previous staff, Director Tai. And then I also would like to see the whole program eliminated. I know it's a tall order, but if you can't do that, at least go look at removing 10 units or under. And that 10 units is specifically because, as I said, the state has redefined. I know I have to go. So anyhow, but I think it's actually important for you. The state has redefined
If you can just wrap it up, please.
Sure, okay, no problem. Lastly, let's focus on creating supportive incentives for housing, low-income housing, instead of things that don't work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak on this item?
John Berry, good evening. I'd like to say thank you to Mike Flaherty for the Veterans Day Memorial, which might be the most valuable small lot redevelopment in the city. Small lot LVR, at this point in the journey, to use Mr. Hoffman's metaphor, is like going past the cop at 90 miles an hour whilst flipping the bird and texting with the other hand. And this is a difficult conversation now, so we should be a little careful because Leo Pastilnikov is watching, and his lawyers are watching, and the sharks smell blood in the water. And I promise you, there are small lot potential developers in this town who are so frustrated that they might just throw some chum in the water. Because it's becoming increasingly clear that the courts will judge our housing element and LVR as part of our housing
Recording
element.
in progress.
And the feasibility of it on the output, not on the claimed intent. And even Cosmont didn't really intend LVR on the small lots to turn out like this. So if our defense is we hired some experts, well, the response is going to be, yeah, and you didn't listen to them. You ignored them, and you ignored your own staff. And this is, I'm not directing this at you, planning commissioners. I'm directing it at council, who ignored the recommendations and raised the fees for small lot LVR. So my plea to you guys is that next time you're faced with a council who try to showboat with some kind of misguided ideology on real estate economics that they don't even understand, give them a smack round the head and tell them to focus on driving and not texting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers that wants to speak?
David Graythan, Hermosa Beach. So I'm trying to understand how reducing or eliminating the LVR, what that would do to further our goals of providing housing, especially lower income housing. And one mechanism that hasn't been explained is if someone does pay the LVR, I don't know how that goes, to some trust fund, and then that's used later to build housing. So I don't know if we've actually quantified how a given fee level would translate into an equivalent amount of housing added. I think that would be a good metric for us to do the analysis, because otherwise, I don't know. This is pretty complicated, and it seems the devil is in the details as far as knowing where exactly to set these levels versus too high versus too low. And then when you did try to set those levels, if you set them lower, then maybe you would get, more volume, right? And so like in business, if you want to maximize profit, it's per unit times quantity. So, would we end up doing better if we got more quantity at a lower value? I don't know the answer to that. What I also don't understand is it seems like if there's no problem just ignoring the existence of the overlay and the LVR, people can just go about their business as it is. I don't quite understand why there's an expectation that this program, which is to encourage housing. Oh, and another point, we're getting metrics that are saying we're doing okay on the market rate or the higher income housing and not the lower. So I understand the argument that, well, this could get us more housing in general, and there's a ripple effect, kind of a spillover effect, and I know people are also making economic development arguments as well. But I think the intent of the program is not economic development, it's housing, and I think for what we need in Hermosa, it's to help us with the lower income housing. And I just don't know if this program in the end is going to help us one way or the other, but I don't see how some of the additional asks that are being made, if those are really appropriate. I know I may not make a lot of friends saying that, but I'm just looking at this and trying to analyze it, as best I can, and it's just not quite adding up for me. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll see if there's anyone online.
There are 2 online guests wishing to speak. Laura, you may speak.
Hi, Laura Pena. I want to start with a true story. In our downtown, there is a small business owner, the kind of person who opens up early, stays late, knows their customer name. 20 years ago, this owner built a second story above his shop. Not a big development, just a modest addition. The second story is still just a shell, unfinished, unoccupied, unused for 2 decades. It's not because the owner didn't want to finish it, but because our policies made it impossible. If anybody wants to understand the heart of the discussion on small lots, that empty second story is the truest feasibility study our city has ever produced. Now, staff had confirmed the reality 1 year in. Not one LVR triggered project, not one affordable unit, not one mixed use project on our housing element site map. Staff acknowledges the importance of reevaluating the program, yet the options suggest if we just kind of tweak the fee maybe slightly, will spark development. Small property owners do not take on multi-year projects with 6-figure risk because the fee is lowered from impossible to slightly less impossible. Staff has given you options, but the only one that confronts reality is B. That's the only one consistent with reality. Options A, C, and E are half measures. They tinker, they postpone. They are incompatible with small lot development. And option D, exploring ways to encourage small lot development, cannot succeed while the LVR fee remains. This moment has real urgency because of what's happening next door. As our director said, small lots represent nearly 25% of the housing element capacity. If these sites are not feasible, then our housing element sits on very thin ice. Just as Redondo, their housing element was certified, they thought their program complied, but the court said paper zoning is not enough. Housing must be realistically buildable, not hypothetically possible. And that is why these small lot decisions matter right now, not next fall, not after one more study, right now. Small business owners, the ones who embody our small town character, should not have to navigate fees and hurdle designed for large developments. The small lot exemption is not about giving anyone a break. It's about recognizing reality. It's about aligning our policy with the scale, the character, and the economics of our downtown. So I just want to end with this. If we don't act now, if we keep our policies that look supportive but function like walls, the next 20 years will echo with more empty shells, more dark windows, and it's not because people didn't want to build or renovate. It's because their city quietly told them not to try. Now, that is a loss that should make everyone shudder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, you may speak.
Hi, Nancy Schwabhack. I'm grateful that our current regime is making a point to listen to our stakeholders. Thank you, Allison and Commission. To that point, the city hired Cosmont to, among other things, theorize about development needs, costs, and revenues in our little city, then proceeded to ignore them. Council rejected Cosmont's and staff's recommendation to exempt small lots from the LVR. A council member pronounced, out of nowhere, as I could see it, we don't need more housing in Hermosa Beach. We need more affordable housing. Well, according to Director Sy in that very meeting, that's not true. HCD frowns upon barriers to any housing. And this LVR, particularly as it impacts small lots, is a barrier to to any housing. So I hope that you will, in the future, instead of hiring or in addition to hiring expensive outsiders, lean on our stakeholders. I'm thinking an open dialogue with property owners, including small and large lot owners. John David is a very thoughtful person with a lot of experience. He wrote a very thoughtful letter. Claudia Berman submitted a detailed set of recommendations based on her impressive experience. Reach out to Frank Buckley at Marlin Equity, just down the street. As the developer of High Rose, they clearly understand what it takes to make affordable housing financially viable. In that case, using density bonus, which, as John David indicated, is just not available in most of our little community, absent massive consolidation. And then reach out to Peter Nolan. According to his family office website, they own 20,000 square feet of peer adjacent property. What would it take for Peter Nolan's family office to develop new housing, including affordable housing? In this specific instance, it seems to make sense to go back to Cosmon's and staff's initial recommendation and listen to the stakeholders and exempt small lots. Then, when resources permit, utilize stakeholder local expertise, which is impressive, to further refine or eliminate this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online?
There are no further online guests wishing to speak.
Okay, before I close the public comment portion of this hearing, do we have any further questions of staff on the staff report? All right, seeing none, then I'll bring it back to the commission for deliberation and discussion. So I forget where I started last time, but Commissioner Flaherty has his hand raised, so we'll start with you.
I just want to go back and, for myself, to remind myself, when this city has dozens of legal non-conforming commercial residential units spread throughout the city that were built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, most of them without any parking whatsoever. Pier Avenue has a handful. PCH has a handful. So the idea that commercial and residential may be a problem, history speaks for that. During my first term as commission, I reissued new regulations for commercial and residential, and it was all based on our effort to revitalize the commercial area. That was the theory behind having residential. It was a rebuilding of Upper Pier Avenue. It was the rebuilding of some commercial areas. It was encouraged by the Chamber of Commerce. All that happened. But during the years that we had, I think we probably had half a dozen units over the last, say, 10 years. A large percentage of them got built, but a larger percentage of them are violating the code. They didn't enhance the commercial. They only enhanced the residential. We saw that a couple meetings ago where we were discussing Hermosa Avenue. Prior to that, the one at Hermosa and Linden had some major problems with it. The house next door to the one we just approved near First Street has advertised residential on both upper and lower floors. So I really don't have a problem with continuing the program of enhancing the commercial by having the residential portion of it. And I'll go ahead and say that I have no problem removing the recapture money at all on small lots. The only issue I would have is, do we do it permanently or 18 months as recommended by staff? So, but there has to be a way to deal with, if this is done to enhance two things. One, no, it's no longer just enhancing the commercial area by revitalizing it. It's completing some RENA requirements. And as we discussed earlier, there is not going to be the ability to require low-income housing. So whatever is being built, it's up to the builder to make that decision. If you eliminate this fee, there is no carrot that way. So my impression is I really, truly appreciate the director giving us the 5 different recommendations, and I'm more inclined to do D and E together. So that would be my, but I do think there has to be some accountability to anybody that builds residential on top of commercial, that they maintain the commercial. It was all about enhancing the commercial. It wasn't, we didn't have arena requirement then for 500 houses. We didn't have any of those requirements that we're facing now. So we're frustrated over it may not be low-income housing. I think we can travel down the same road. We still have to complete housing. We still have to accomplish a lot of housing, whether we accomplish this. I also believe the director is right on point. The only way we're going to increase low-income housing is to do it ourselves. So that's my point of view, and I appreciate your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Arzant?
Thank you, Chair Hurst. Sometimes it just all comes down to money. So, and I hate to pick on poor old Upper Pier, and I'll even say on both the north side and the south side of Upper Pier, we've talked about strengthening. Before we put the overlay on the north and south side, the owners of those properties were free to do whatever they wanted to that they felt made economic sense. But except for some office buildings, there hasn't been a lot of development on the north and south side of Upper Pier. Maybe there's some other barriers to entry, partially the city's fault, but there hasn't been a lot of development. So setting aside the issue of housing for a moment, what I see is that this overlay has created an economic benefit for those who wish to take advantage of it. And consequently, what I've heard a number of people say is, for small lots, eliminate LVR entirely. That means then that the owner captures 100% of an action by the city. And I cannot support just giving away 100%. Now, $70 a square foot, probably the wrong number. Maybe even 60 is too high. So I would support retaining an LVR number for small lots, but significantly lower than the $70 now. I do also agree, though, that, and Lord knows I hate to hire more consultants and involve more committees, but the setting that we have right here is not conducive for solving the problem that we have in terms of some realistic approaches to the housing that we need. And so consequently, I would support D, exploring zoning regulations that could encourage development. I would also, let's see, where is that? I'm sorry, I'm looking there. Well, along with D, I would, let's call it an enhanced D. I would support the idea of that, whether it's a couple of architects, some landowners that are directly involved, a couple of commissioners, a couple of city council folks, that can sit down in a public setting and really hash out what would be an incentive to help achieve the goals that we have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner McNally?
The land value recaption came to the City Council in March of 2025, and that was prior to my experience here on the commission. So I've spent a great deal of time understanding where this came from and how it worked and the recommendations from others. But as a homeowner and someone who has owned businesses from San Francisco, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, I just can't even fathom another hurdle, restriction, cost to come my way. So if I had my way, I would like to see this go away completely forever. But I don't believe that that's really the direction we're heading. I feel as though the tide is really focused on the small lots and providing opportunities for that small area. And I believe that's where I'll probably find my ground.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman?
A couple of things as I'm listening to my fellow commissioners and thinking about everything we've heard tonight. I guess the first thing is, I've only been involved in urban planning for a little over 50 years. I've never, ever, until about the last year or two, ever heard the term land value recapture. It's called land value capture. Your property taxes are land value capture. If you have an assessment when they underground your lights, that's a value capture. The captures directly. The situation why I guess we invented a new term for this is something imposed upon property owners without their participation. I live in one of the districts in town here that was very fortunate that we did an undergrounding. We voted on that. We initiated it. That is, the residents initiated. We essentially agreed to tax ourselves for the benefit of this improvement in the infrastructure. Same things happened in a couple of other locations in town. When the city comes in and pays our street and replaces our sewers, which they've done, it gets reflected in our property values going up, and the city gets the money back in property tax. I think Mr. David mentioned this whole idea. The reason, again, we've created this term recapture, I hate to say it, to me, it's a politically correct way of suggesting to you, we're adding a new tax to you without your participation or support for it necessarily, and we're imposing it upon you in a way that there's this hypothetical value that somehow you're going to recognize at some point. Now, I get the theory of it. Again, I hate to go back to where we were the previous discussion. The reality is, though, the idea that we're generating money, whether it's enough for, I'm looking at the $76. I assume that had to have come from saying, well, it costs roughly $150. We'll split it in half. I don't know how else you come up with an odd number for this. The same thing with the 104. They must have come up with, well, it's 208 or 210. We'll cut it in half. The home or the property owner will pay, their fair share, half of that cost that we can then use to somehow create affordable housing. The problem, of course, as has been discussed in the previous section, so far it's generated exactly zero money for the construction of low-income housing. I hate, again, you're always reluctant in a public forum. It's been a failure if that's the goal. And the goal was not, I don't think the goal was intentionally to punish our small property owners in Upper Pier and the others. The goal was to try and see, can we generate some revenue from this that we can use to construct. They're not going to do it. It's interesting, if you read the Cosmot report, it suggests about feasibility. In other words, it's possible this could happen. But if you quote that, it says the inclusion this is not an evaluation of what market can bear. It goes on, the inclusion, anyway, of the, it's going to have a negative impact. I mean, they're honest about this. To suggest that it said it's feasible is a different thing than saying that we're predicting it's going to occur. My sense of this is, but we're in the context of we've got to address the arena. My response to this then is this program failed. This is program 7, remember, in our programs to accomplish the arena numbers. I would say, well, it hasn't worked. Let's get rid of that, at least for the small lot properties. And again, we keep saying Upper Pier, but it's all of them, of course. And then let's look at whoops, timing out on me here. The D was recommend the City Council direct staff to explore zoning regulations that encourage development of residential units on small lots. Well, as Commissioner Flaherty has suggested, and I was on a committee decades ago when we did the revisions on Upper Pier, we all envisioned, if you see the renderings that were done for that project, they all included a second story on Upper Pier. The argument in those days is we want
personal services and we want the doctors and we want those things upstairs. We want the retail, we want the window shopping, we want the things that are going to, to animate the streetscape on the ground floor. That didn't occur to us that we should have residential up there, but as Commissioner Flaherty says, we're just going back. This is one of those things where they call it new urbanism. We're going back to the way it was in the 1920s and 30s and before, when that's what we had in our downtowns. I have no problem with that. I think that's the spirit maybe of item D, so I'm looking at, let's not, and then one last point. One of our programs, number 12, remove government constraints. Well, it appears to me that land value, I stumble over it, land value capture has in fact become a constraint on the development of residential properties on Upper Rear. And we've got to build them now. The market is not, it's interesting, one last point, I keep saying that. The other point though is our director pointed out, property values have actually gone down for most of us in Hermosa Beach. The cost of construction has gone way up. Interest rates for loans and so forth have gone up. The market's terrible right now compared to what it has been through most of our adult lives. And yet, 380 projects have been initiated. It's not like we're not going to build housing, but we're not going to build low-income housing, and we're certainly not going to build low-income housing, below market rate housing, on small lots of 3,000 square feet with commercial ground floor. That's not going to solve our problem. And related to that, the idea that we're looking for, it's interesting, my experience on this commission, most people at Hermosa Beach aren't inclined to advocate for the consolidation of properties into larger lots. We don't want big apartment buildings. We want to maintain the small, eclectic character that we have precipitated by the lots that we have, especially in the sand section. Now, on the east side, we're going to look at a project, if we ever get to our regular meeting today, it's on a huge lot. That's a different scenario, but it's residential properties. That's where the accessory dwelling units and those kinds of things can help us address some of this. So my inclination is to suggest to our council that we exempt the small lots and then we encourage staff to develop a program that will in fact actually effectively accomplish what the goal is.
Thank you. My thoughts on the land value recapture program are, it was approved in March and it's November. So we're less than a year into this program and we're trying to decide whether it's a success or a failure. And I don't think we've had enough time to truly evaluate that. I also respect that the idea of the land value capture program was because we were providing zoning flexibility for lots that previously didn't have it. So we're creating value for those property owners in return for hopefully trying to meet our RENA numbers on our low-income housing units. So completely eliminating the program doesn't seem to me that it achieves that objective. I appreciate Commissioner Flaherty's comments about, how do we do mixed use responsibly, especially if we're thinking about small lots. How do we not forget what the commercial on the ground floor and making it an asset to the property. I think that that's something that staff really needs to think through as we continue to talk about what does the redevelopment of small lots look like. I am not in a position where I would feel comfortable recommending to the city council to significantly modify the land value recapture program. However, I do agree with, I think, a good amount of my fellow commissioners in terms of the options that staff has clearly laid out. I appreciate you guys putting some thought into this to help us come to a conclusion here. But I think item number D, recommend the city council direct staff to explore zoning regulations that could encourage development on small lots. And I I came into this conversation thinking B was reasonable. You know, if you've got, why would we overburden the very small lots that can only put 1 to 2 units on their property with this fee? You know, if that becomes 50 to 100% of their property has to be affordable housing or have the fee incurred, and that seems out of proportion to me. So I would also be inclined to support B, and we could do a temporary pause or we could recommend a temporary pause for up to 18 months for small lots to see where that gets us. So that's a long way of saying I like all of the ideas, but I do also like the general structure of the land value recapture program. I think it's important in the city trying to achieve our long-term goals of providing affordable units in the city. So, any other debate?
So a question of clarification. When you first were talking about land value recapture, which would be E, I thought you were initially supporting the idea of maintaining that, but at a lower dollar amount. But at the very end, it sounded like that you wanted to eliminate it totally for 18 months.
Only item number B says, you know, we can exempt the smallest lots that can only provide 1 to 2 units from having to pay a land value recapture fee. If you look further on in this report, or further forward, I forget where it is here, but it talks about the 15% low income, the 15% very low income, or the 25% moderate income units. And then when you take a property that can only provide 1 or 2 units, that's out of proportion to the rest of the idea around capturing fees for land value recapture.
Chair, let me try a motion, see if it gathers any interest. So I move that we recommend to the City Council item B, which is to exempt smaller lots with a minimum density of 1 to 2 units. That also D, to direct staff to explore zoning regulations that could encourage development of residential units. And E, a temporary fee reduction for 18 months. I'm going to suggest 24 months, and I'm just going to arbitrarily say $40. So that's my motion.
Just to clarify with staff or legal for your motion, when we first talked about the land value recapture program, we did not opine on fees. That was left to City Council, if I recall correctly. So should we be setting fee targets at this? Recommending fee targets. That's a question.
Just for the record, Chair Hirsch, to clarify the staff report, and I think you just, as you were gathering your thoughts and you know, kind of talking about how long the program has been in place. The program has actually been in place since 2024, since July of 2024, right? So it's been a year and a half now. And the request from council to study came in March.
Thank you for the clarification.
Well, it was adopted in January 2024, but it didn't go into effect until the housing element was certified, and that was the trigger for the implementation timeline.
And the certification of the housing element was?
In July 2024.
Madam Chair, just the way I read B is in conflict with E.
Yeah.
So I know that you coupled the B and E, or one of you guys coupled E and B together.
My intent is that E would apply to anything where three units or greater. 1 or 2 units are totally exempt.
Okay, so
So, yeah, staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but the definition for small lots is lots with a density of 4 or fewer units. And then there are lots that only can provide 1 to 2 units based on density. So there's no defined term for that, but very small lots. Maybe we do define a term for that.
Well, if that's what your intent is, the way we're reading this, that's essentially, yeah, I've got no problem with
So
that.
my
I share
intent
Mike's
is,
concern that it's.
so my intent for B is that the 1 to 2 units are totally exempt. They are not affected by E. E is for 3 units and greater, and I'm picking $40 as an arbitrary amount. I'm open to 35. I'm open to 42.50.
We don't need to worry about that.
Okay.
That's the council's problem.
Oh, well, good point. We're only recommending. So my motion has a recommendation of $40.
And then also to further clarify, so the LVR program does distinguish between sites that would permit 1 to 4 dwelling units and then 5+. So for the recommendation to reduce that fee, we're applying that to all dwelling units 3+. And we're not addressing this divide we already have currently in our program.
What was the dividing line, please, again?
It's 1 to 2 dwelling units, the small lots.
Right, but the council,
Yeah,
that was
and
4
then-
units, and
And then 5+. So that 4 to 5 is the dividing line.
I'm open for suggestions on that one.
So you just want to apply this to the 3 and 4 that we're not covering with B, is that correct? In other words, the other part of that.
So
small
the
lot.
recommendation is $40 for 3 to 4 and $50 for 5 and above.
Well, but that, E's only talking about small lots.
I'm just trying to keep things consistent here or something, or. All right, so yes, so the answer is only between 3 and 4 lots. We weren't asked to opine on 5 lots and above, so you're right, my motion does not affect 5 lots and above for dollar value.
Okay.
So that's my motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
one last discussion. Could you repeat the full motion one more time?
So I move item B, exempt smaller lots with a minimum density of 1 to 2 units from any dollar value land value recapture fee. I move recommendation D, to have the council direct staff to explore zoning regulations that could encourage development. And E, a temporary fee reduction for lots of 3 and 4 units for 24 months for $40.
So it's been moved and seconded. Can we have a vote?
Commissioner McNally,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes?
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Izant,
Yes.
Chairperson Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Yes, thank you for compiling all those thoughts into one clean motion. Okay. Last item on the agenda is adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned. It's 7:42 PM.